we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not. Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation while asking the question, is anything what it seems? Based on my series, A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app, I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what the podcast is all about. I also hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel so I can continue to bring you great guests like, again, we have today. I'm your host, Delgarda, and today it's a pleasure and a privilege to welcome Norman Wolfe to the podcast, Better Than Not. Norman, how are you today?
I am doing wonderful, Doug, and thank you for having me.
I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. Norman is he's worked for Pratt & Whitney. He led, I'll say, the turnaround for HP to a $1.2 billion company back in the 90s, which is that's a phenomenal accomplishment. He's today the CEO of Quantum Leaders, and he's also authored a book entitled The Living Organization, which I'm very excited to get into. And you can see that right up beside Norman there. But Norman, I thought I'd get started today with how does I'll call it a mathematics major, a mathematician, who I always think of when I think of math as someone who is wired a little bit differently, tends to be introverted, move on in a relatively short period of time to lead an organization like HP or Hewlett Packard to the tune of $1.2 billion turnaround. How does that happen, Norman?
I wish I knew. No. So, as you point out, my undergraduate is mathematics, and as part of mathematics, I took some electives in what was basically early days of computer science, right? So I learned how to write assembly language on the UNIVAC 1180. I learned Fortran.
Yes.
And then as you, not to date myself too much, right? And leaving university, I wanted to work in aeronautical engineering. I had a passion for planes, and I got my pilot's license when I was 19. Haven't flown for many, many years, but I always loved the notion. I actually wanted to be a Air Force pilot, but because of eye problems, I couldn't be a fighter pilot. I can go to the Air Force Academy, but I couldn't actually be the pilot. I could be a navigator, I could be bombardier, I could be a logistics officer or whatever. But so I decided early on that if I couldn't fly them, I designed them and build them. So I looked for jobs coming out of university with an orientation to aeronautical engineering, and that's what landed me at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. But they hired me not to become an engineer, but to become basically a programmer. I was put into a group that was responsible for the application, design and application of the software that would analyze the fuel cell testing they were doing. Pratt & Whitney developed a fuel cell for the Apollo mission.
Amazing.
And they decided that they wanted to see if they could commercialize it. And they had an idea of using fuel cells to power strip malls. That was the target market they were going after. And they were testing these fuel cells and the inverters, and we ran the tests. My group ran the tests to put them through their paces.
Amazing.
We bought an early version of an HP real-time data acquisition system. And I ended up being responsible for both the application program and the systems maintenance and systems programming of that system, which is how my connection to HP happened.
Okay, because I'm saying like you're one of the early programmers, man. Like
Yeah,
working with like that world has become everything almost in the technical world, and
yes.
you're one of the pioneers.
Well, early participants.
Okay, fair.
But that was the journey from mathematics to computers, which is not such a bad leap, to Hewlett Packard,
Oh yeah.
working in the sales region with the sales reps and on sales calls and working with customers and using our equipment, applying it, and so forth. And I was very well respected within HP. I was actually respected by HP before because of the work I did at Pratt and Whitney with their equipment was pushing the envelope, so to speak, making it do things that most people didn't know how to make. So I had a pretty good reputation already within HP before I joined.
Well, Norman, when I think of HP, I mean, if I put it in today, it's like getting to work at HP was kind of like I'll compare it to like a company like Tesla today. Like
Yeah,
that was a pretty big deal. Even Pratt and Whitney coming out of university and going to work for Pratt and Whitney. Like
yeah.
many
Back
people just dreamed about that.
back in 1973, which is when I joined HP, HP was still, I would consider, be just at the forefront of their heyday. Right?
Yes.
You had the iconic HP, but then they got into computers, and Dave and Bill, um, Hewlett and Packard was still around. John Young was the CEO. He was the first
Hmm.
CEO that took over from Dave and Bill. So it was still in that sort of early days, just before we began what I consider its phenomenal growth in the computer
Oh,
area.
oh, that's the word, Norman. I like when you say that, you're just bringing back so many thoughts because I'm thinking HP was written up in Tom Peters in Search of
Yep.
Excellent,
Yeah.
like as a premier company. And
Iconic. The
uh,
HP way, management
absolutely.
by wandering around. Those were the core principles I learned in terms of management thinking, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh my goodness. Like you were in a spectacular time to be there
I
because
was, I
we
was,
talked about before going on to the air here about I had a like an HP, I think 41C calculator. And
yeah,
Norman, when that like saying calculator today is almost like talking about dinosaurs.
yeah,
It's like if a person even knows what that means, it's kind of stunning how quickly that disappeared. But like that was the calculator to get. Like I can just remember doing all that. And here you're working with that organization and then joining it and making things happen.
yeah. It was wonderful time, and like I said, they were cutting edge in terms of
Oh,
organization and management philosophy. Dave and Bill were really. I feel blessed that I was able to be part of that cultural
oh,
uh, genre, if you will.
changed the world.
It really did, and it changed me in a lot of ways. So, here I am coming out of an aerospace firm, very structured, very hierarchical, very militaristic like. And here I'm joining HP, which is, centered around management by objective,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
HP way, management by wandering around, all those kind of core principles, as you said, Tom Peters in Search of Excellence. And um, so at HP, I was given it after being so successful in my first couple of years. People saw something in me, and they offered me the opportunity to become a district service manager. I always saw myself as being a leader in an organization at some point in time, and so naturally I took the opportunity. What I didn't realize is what I was really stepping into.
Okay.
Well, just think about it. Here I am. I'm a sales and systems engineering type, right? And culturally, the service business is like a different part of
Oh,
the right. It's not made up of salespeople, professional engineers, systems engineers, typically college trained. It's made up of technicians that came out of the military that repaired computers or actually repaired voltmeters and oscilloscopes. And now they were repairing computers, and they were not only repairing them on the bench, they were repairing them on customer sites. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so there was really going through a major, you might call, cultural transformation.
Oh yeah.
I was unaware of that, call it that cultural dynamic, that cultural change dynamic. But hey, managing people, I manage customers, I work well with people, I can do this. I also worked into an environment, so I didn't know anything about fixing computers. Right?
Okay.
That's not my expertise.
Right.
So I'm taking over a responsibility for an organization that I don't have the expertise my people do.
Mm.
In a situation where I am facing a major cultural transformation that I'm not aware of is happening underneath everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the service district was a P&L center, not a cost center. So now I got a P&L responsibility. I remember going to lunch with a CEO of a company that was about the same size. So my district was about $12 million, $12 million in revenue when I took it over. I was talking to the CEO who was a $12 million company. We had lunch and we were comparing what he does versus what I do. And it concluded that we do exactly the same things, very much. We have the exact same job. And then he turned to me and said, except for one thing. I go, what's that? He said, you never have to worry about meeting payroll.
Oh.
So I began to realize that, yeah, in many ways, I'm the CEO of my own company, except I'm within this
Yeah.
organization that provides me the benefit of resources that other
Yeah.
CEOs don't have.
Yeah. Pretty
Well,
cool experience, actually.
it was again one of those moments where there was a little shift in my thinking, right? I'm not just thinking of myself as an employee of this company doing what my bosses want me to do, but I'm taking a sense of ownership. I'm being the CEO of my own entity.
Huh?
Except I don't know what my people do. I don't know how to do what they do. I'm in a cultural transformation situation, so I'm taking over a turnaround of some sort, and I'm working in an environment where my boss is not very supportive.
Oh, now that's a big difference. That like Norman right there. Okay. So because I'm thinking, okay, you did a lot. You went from mathematician into Pratt and Whitney doing a thing. But now this is the personnel part. This is the
I'm
okay.
now dealing with a very challenging situation.
Oh my
Needless to
goodness.
say, my awakening moment, my choice point in life, I had just come back from an anniversary celebration with my then wife, um, and we would spend. It was 1976. We were in the UK on holiday, and I come back. Um, and it's time for my annual performance review.
Oh wow.
So, I knew I was struggling. And so I wasn't expecting a glowing review, but my boss gave me a review that was unacceptable in every category. Now, you talk about a shock to the system.
No kidding. Oh wow.
And as I said, that was actually one of the greatest gifts of my life in many ways, as I look back on it. It wasn't very
Yes.
nice at the time, but
No, no.
because it made me stop and think, what do I really want to do with my life? It took me out of the hubris of how good I was, what I was doing, and I'm going to be good wherever I go to. Well, I really failed.
Oh.
Now what?
Interesting. Oh yeah.
So I committed, and I got a lot of support, not by my direct supervisor, my boss, but the region general manager, some of my peers who were other district service managers. They suggested that I stick with it. And I really
Oh.
did want to learn how to be successful as a leader. So I had to learn how to lead a group of people for which I did not know what they did. I wasn't a service guy and says, hey, here's how I was successful. You be successful
Yes.
like me, right? I had to do it in a cultural transformation period, like sort of a turnaround period. And I began to apply the same thinking that I had as a systems engineer, problem solving, systems analysis,
Mm.
to what is it? What is this challenge I'm dealing with over here as a leader of people? And that began to guide me into, I don't want to say research like an academic would do research, but
Right.
exploration into what does it mean to lead a group of people? What is a collective of people? How do they operate? Why do they operate? What motivates them? They're not extrinsically. And I went through the whole discovery about what leadership really is.
Wow.
Needless to say, I became successful as a district service manager, was promoted to the position of area service manager. So now I had district service managers working for me. Ran a very successful area, one of the best performing areas in the region.
Amazing.
And then we were struggling as a service business getting the right kind of administrative support from our administrative organization. Excuse me a second. I just came out of a 2-week period of a respiratory infection, so I still have it. So I came out. I had made a very, how should I say, quite impressive and powerful presentation to corporate that the administrative organization was dysfunctional, that here's why, and that what they should do is move the administrative organization at HP at this time was sort of the glue that kept HP as HP.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
They were a separate organization from the sales organization or the systems engineer or the service business. And remember, the service business is a P&L.
Yes. Yeah.
Function, right? So our P&L capability is directly impacted by how well we're supported by the administrative organization that helps with contract renewals and helps with dispatching and everything else that was critical to our operation. But they didn't report to me. I had no control over them.
Yep.
So clearly I made a wonderful case and I explained why and what's wrong with the administrative organization, the way it's designed and all that. So the reward was that they asked me to run the administrative organization for the sales region.
Careful what you wish for.
So I didn't get what I wanted, but I did get what I wanted from a different angle, so to speak. So I took over, as you pointed out, this $1.2 billion, the administrative organization for a $1.2 billion region. So I had responsibility for all of the branch offices. There were 17 branch offices, about 1,300 people in the organization. So, fairly
substantial. That's huge.
When I say it was a turnaround, it was really a significant, poorly performing organization. We got absolutely abysmal reports from the people we served. That was the salespeople, the service people, the systems engineering organization. They hated us, as I did when I was on that side of the fence. I knew what I was walking into. We got our first, I guess within 2 weeks of taking over the organization, the corporate had concluded their internal audit of the region. And so we got the audit report. Now, I'm new to this whole game of audits and administration. Yeah. Another organization I have no expertise in. I've never been a branch manager. I never processed an order. I never did accounts receivable, any of the things I was now responsible for. So I get this audit report, and it's about 39, 40 pages long. And I'm reading through it, and I go, wow, this is cool. I got, they've done my SWOT analysis for me. This is, they've told me what's wrong and what I need to go fix. This is really cool. This makes my job so much easier. Except my general manager, Phil, walks in and he says, I just got off the phone with John Young. It wasn't a pleasant call. Oh. I never want to get one of those again, and walks out of my office.
Oh, boy.
First time I realized maybe this isn't a good thing. Of course, later on, I learned that auditors, usually if there's a problem with an organization, you get 1 or 2 management letters, right?
Yep.
1 or 2 pages long, maybe 3. This is 39 pages. Clearly, I had a problem. When I went to my first corporate meeting with my peers, the other region admin managers, and we went through the performance data, the KPIs and so forth, it became a joke because after the first couple, it was like, we got the Eastern sales region is number one on this, that, and Southern region is number one in here. And the Western region, the nearly sales region, which is what I was responsible for, was last in every category. It got so funny that,
Oh.
and the region that shall remain nameless.
Oh
So
man.
that's what I walked into,
But I
and
mean, we're chuckling now, but that was very real to you.
very real.
Like, because you're in, like you said, you've explained this a couple of times now. You're in another area where this is not your expertise.
Not my expertise, and not really a foundation that I can rely on. So I literally went out and set out to change the whole organization. And
Wow.
I began to apply the principles, which is now core to the living organization, without realizing what I was doing at the time.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure. Yes, I
I
was
was
gonna
just
say.
doing it because, like every good leader that you find who writes a book, like Yuba Jolie, who wrote uh, The Heart of the Company. He was the former CEO of Best Buy and walked Best Buy
Mm,
through its turnaround, right? He found the secret to success, and others are the same way. John Mackey and at Whole Foods, and his movement into conscious capitalism, and uh, Gary Ridge from WD-40, who wrote the book Any Dumbass Can, talking about his leadership style and how
yeah.
any dumbass can be a good leader if you know these things. um, I kind of ended up, without realizing it, I was in the same category of I stumbled through and I figured out what it takes to be an effective leader. And I applied those to a very bad situation. And in 3 years, we were the top performing region, not only in the country, but in the world. So,
That's
um, clearly I knew something.
well, it's interesting. I sometimes like this is where I come back to. I started with saying that you graduated in mathematics, a mathematician, and I sometimes wonder whether um, that type of learning, like you're obviously wired in a mathematical zone because like mathematics isn't easy to fake. But did it help you to kind of go through these and like you've already got a person kind of talent because you're able to work with others, but did did your math background help you with this at all, or did it was like
I would say yes. I think my math, not just my math, but my math and science
oh, okay,
orientation, I would say that what it gave me and what it grounded me in is the ability to think systemically.
yes,
Think of the whole picture. What are the dynamic forces at play? Um, I had a partner I worked with in the late '90s, and he described me this way: ask Norman what time it is, and before he'll answer, he'll take the clock apart, research everything there is about the notion of time, understand what time is and how the clock represents that, reconstruct it so it's easy to understand and explain to others, and then he'll tell you it's 3 o'clock with such a degree of confidence you'll believe him even if it wasn't. That's the way he described me. And I guess to a large degree, that's true. I am. Another person described me as a map maker. I take very
oh, okay,
complex situations and break it apart and understand it from a way that makes it easy to understand what is really going on. I'm sort of a Stephen Hawkins, I guess, in some
yep.
regards, of management and business. Um, and I have to say, I love that saying you have behind you, a changing frame of reference.
Oh,
I
yes,
have come
absolutely,
to believe that our frame of reference defines our reality,
no
and it
question.
and it really defines uh, the choices we make, how we see the world, how we respond to the world, um, and therefore defines the outcomes we're capable of creating. And you'll see Buckminster Fuller has a saying
Mm.
that I kind of lived by as I began on this journey back in the early 2000s. Don't try to fix the old paradigm.
Oh my goodness,
Create a new paradigm and let the old one die away. And so the living organization framework actually came about um, as my realization that the reason we're not successful in business repeatedly, and what I mean by that is the statistics from the academics or the other consulting firms or the research firms or the statistical people out there have documented repeatedly that the failure rate of strategy execution runs about 70%.
Mm.
Only about 30% are being successful. But what always interested me was, especially as I started on this path in 2000, why is that so when we have all this wisdom? Going back to Tom Peters, that you mentioned
Right.
earlier, even before him. But, we saw with Tom Peters and Jim Collins and
Oh, yes.
Daniel Pink. I mean, with tools like Balance Scorecard for execution management or entrepreneur operating system, we have all the tools and the knowledge of what it makes to be effective. And that's when I discovered we're stuck in a paradigm. We have a frame of reference that is causing us to behave in ways that will prevent our success.
Oh, that's so impactful. What you just said there, Norman. Well, I can't help but think when you're saying this, and this is why I think it was success. I was told years and years ago by a gentleman. He says, when you're going to go and change something, make very, very sure you know what you're changing. And that's almost what your friend said when you asked for the time. I couldn't help but remember this saying,
Yes,
because it's like you know what you're changing to change that, right? And to your point, another individual had said to me one time, sometimes rather than trying to change what's already there, sometimes you just got to blow it up and start again.
that's the essence of Buckminster Fuller's statement
Yes,
that
absolutely. I didn't
I
know Buckminster Fuller had said that, though. That's very cool.
yeah, it's one of the key quotes I found myself living by. I can't say I actually chose it, but I could not abandon what I began to realize that we're stuck in what I now call we're stuck in a paradigm trap.
No question.
And so, uh,
Interesting. That's kind of how that started to come together. You mentioned Jim Collins there because I think his Good to Great, the Red Book, is beyond a business book.
it
And
is.
and he has so many first principle things in it. But what's interesting is he supports that with data.
Yes.
And it's very interesting that he was able to put that together. He was just a very intriguing, I'll say, read. So it's interesting and you mentioned Daniel Pink as well.
Same thing. Yeah, there's a group of people out there. I am not one of them, like Jim and like Daniel Pink, and others in that same category, that are researchers. They're
Hmm.
academics. They collect data, they analyze data, they synthesize data, and they use the data to support new ways of thinking, changes in reference,
Hmm.
frame of reference. My work was really more from experience, empirical data. I lived through it, and I began to be frustrated by it, and I began to break it down.
Mm.
You know, from the very first time I got my performance review. Talk
Yeah.
about being frustrated by
Oh,
it.
no kidding.
What am I missing here? What's wrong? It should work. It's not working. When I left HP, I um, I just started to consult with people. I didn't even know if I could become a consultant, right?
Hmm.
I joke around, I left HP and I left the big mothership of security of the
Oh,
corporate world into the cold,
yep.
harsh waves of the entrepreneurial ocean with not even a life preserver. I had to figure out, how do you
Yep.
write a contract? How do I price myself? What am I offering? And um, but I worked with a lot of wonderful companies and got a lot of experience. I worked with a company where I helped train their salespeople because I came from HP sales region,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
and I did a lot of trainings as a manager there. And I worked with another company doing salary administration because as head of admin, I had to develop a salary administration program for HP. So I used that. I kept
Amazing.
moving around from company to company, business process reengineering, lean operations, Six
Oh,
Sigma.
lean. Yes, yes. All those.
And
Yes.
I was blessed with opportunities to help companies, turnarounds, mergers and acquisitions, startups, venture capital. And that was from 1988 to 2001. Um, and
Interesting.
2001 was the beginning of the shift onto the path I'm on now. It started with me coming out of being the chief operating officer of a startup that I was with for 5 years. 2001 was an interesting point in my life. We had started with 9/11
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
after
mm-hmm.
2001.
Yep, yep.
A couple of weeks after 9/11, my parents were in a not fatal car crash, but a minor
Oh,
car crash. So
oh.
both of my parents were injured, my mom especially. But my mom was fairly weak from other diseases. I mean, she was 82 at the time. And so the crash had caused her to, anyway, she ended up passing in that time.
Oh.
My wife and I got married right after my mom passed. And then a week after our wedding, my dad passed.
Well, that's a lot. Wow.
Well, there's one more. And then a week after my dad passed, 2 weeks after, I guess it was a month after my dad passed, the funding we had for the startup that was supposed to come through fell through.
Oh, boy. That's a lot at once.
So, needless to say, it was another one of those life moments, just like when I had my
Yes. Performance review.
another life moment where it's like, what am I all about? What am I doing? Where am I going? And I was talking to a client and I asked him, why does he keep hiring me as a consultant? And without even blinking, he said, you help me execute faster.
Oh, well, that's
And
easy. That's an easy one.
and so, of course, that's what I've always been interested in. From the first day I took over as management, how do I know collective of people execute more effectively, right?
Oh, yeah. That's big.
Especially when execution is not about what they've already been doing, but what they want to be doing, which is a shift, right?
Yep. Oh,
And when,
huge. Yes.
and when you make a shift from what you're doing, we optimize our behaviors to keep doing what we're doing more efficiently, which is a natural human trait. But when somebody comes along and says, "You know what, you've been doing so well all these years, we're
Oh,
going to change that."
that big word change. That's
That
so that
that doesn't happen quite so easily, and
no, that I think inspires terror in an awful lot of people.
it really does. And so I began to, and that's when I began to, well, as I said, look at 70% failures. Why is that? Coming up with the idea that we're stuck in a paradigm. What's a new paradigm? And interestingly enough, I love how life unfolds, or should I say, how life guides me. It's almost like there's this big, I don't want to say puppeteer, but because it's not, doesn't quite feel like that. But there's definitely a force in life that guides all of us into
No
doing
question.
what we are uniquely capable of contributing. And I really believe that fairly strongly. And so I'm at a conference with getting to know people. We're on break, and I'm talking to this woman, and she's asking what I did, and I asked what she did. She was a freelance editor, and it's interesting. And then she asked me what I did, and I told her, at this time I've got this focus, right? I help companies execute strategy more effectively.
Yeah.
And so she asked me the words, what makes you different than any other consultant that does that? I
Oh,
go, oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
The words that came out of my mouth, unrehearsed, was, I think it's because I look at a company differently. I see it as something alive, as a person having a soul and a purpose and a persona.
Oh, man.
And she said, wow,
The living organism,
you should be
organization.
you should write a book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, right. So, you talk about the journey. Here I am from a mathematician to a programmer to a systems engineer at HP to now learning how to lead organizations to consulting. And now I'm going to write a book. I'm not a journalist major. I'm not an author. I'm not an academic like Collins or Pink. I don't write for a living. I do for a living. So
So Norm, I'm going to interrupt a little bit here because I
yeah,
think this
sure.
is fascinating in what you said, because we've mentioned a couple of times mathematics. You never really took a job in that. You're into the computer science world. What is it, do you think? Because now you've had time to go back to the dots backwards, to connect things. Was there something growing up that allows you to? Because many people can't change that, and you seem to almost thrive on it. You get frustrated by it, as you mentioned already, but you've had so many kind of different things, and now you've got what did you say, a literary consultant or an editor talking to you about writing a book, and it's not like you're shutting this down. You're just it's just another thing, and obviously, subsequently, you've created the book beside you called The Living Organization. Um, is there do you, like can you think, like, is there something in your childhood or growing up or your parental influence that maybe allows you to look at things a little differently?
You're asking the question that I really don't have an answer to. The question is it nature or nurture?
Well,
Is
it's
this
I
is
just
this in my childhood, my parents, my upbringing, my my nurturing, my environment that stimulated, or is it something I was born with? I think it's a little bit of both. If I look back at my parents, my mom was legally blind throughout my whole life. And she could
oh
see,
wow.
but very limitedly. But she was an avid reader. She was always curious. She challenged. She thought. Right? Did that have an influence on me? I'm sure it did. My dad
Mhm.
was an entrepreneur. He never graduated high school. He worked in the schmata trade. He was in the garment industry in New York City. Right? He had his own little business. Started with his brother when he was like 16 or 17.
Wow.
They grew it. It sustained us. He worked at one of the aerospace companies, one of the military companies, and during World War II. So he never went overseas to fight. Um, but he was basically an entrepreneur. I remember sitting at the dinner table, helping him count the payroll and putting them in the little squares that he would hand out, every week. Um, so yeah, did
Oh
that
wow.
did that environment have some impact on me? It did, especially my dad, who I know when I left HP and was out on my own. My dad had to go bankrupt. We talk about offshoring, how jobs go
Yes.
out of this
Oh
country.
yeah. Yep.
What we don't realize is that's happening all the time, even internally. My dad was in the garment industry in North Carolina, either North Carolina or South Carolina, the Appalachian region. A
Hmm.
lot of the free labor or cheap labor that was down there, people like dress manufacturers and so forth, started to move the jobs down there, and it put my dad out of business. He had to declare bankruptcy. I think I was 16 when he did. He was 46 when he declared bankruptcy.
Wow.
No high school education. He starts over as a bookkeeper. He gets his GED. He begins to take some college classes after he gets his GED. He learns about computers. His job in this little consulting company where he was a bookkeeper, he morphed into helping them run their computer system, and ended up being head of their IT department.
Oh wow.
As small as it wasn't a big thing. Um, so did that have an impact on me? Was that a model I can draw on as I was beginning my? I think it was, but I
Hmm.
think there's also a part of me that always had a curiosity about life
Okay.
very early. Um, I think a big part of it was actually driven by my desire to control life, oddly enough. I
Interesting.
used to say, if you live life with the question, why am I getting the results or the outcomes I'm getting? And how can I get more of what I want and less of what I don't want? If that's sort of a question that runs in your back of your mind all the time,
Hmm.
That's going to make a person, well, it certainly made me very curious about
Hmm.
why do things happen the way they do. Taking that clock apart, right?
Hmm.
And being very curious about why do things happen this way, which leads me into a lot of different interesting fields, everything from physics,
Oh
quantum
yeah,
physics, how the
no kidding.
universe works, to sociology, to psychology, to Carl Jung's work,
Oh,
to shamanism and spiritual practices and religion and traditions and mystics. You know, I've delved into quite a lot. Took the clock of life apart,
yeah,
and
it is.
unlike Newton, who said the world's a mechanical thing, I said no, it's an energetic thing, and it's all about the dance of energies, and that's what I began to live with.
Well, Norman, when you say that, I'm always fascinated by this. When you mention about the control part, because I mean, most of my life has been in that kind of world as well. But it occurred to me not that long ago that I had nothing to do with coming into this world. And it's like, how does that work? Like like
It,
why did I come in the 60s and the 20th century versus not the 1500s? Or why did I come into Canada and not Africa?
why did you come into the specific family that you came into
Oh,
with your parents, right? Those are questions I constantly am exploring from not from an academic point of view, but just from a curiosity point of
oh,
view.
huge.
I read a lot about that, and I listen to podcasts and shows, and I constantly explore. I actually was ordained as an interfaith minister because I was really curious about not what makes each religion different, but really what makes them the same.
Hmm.
Early on in my life, I think I was in my 20s, I went through a little bit of a crisis period. And knowing I couldn't live through that, I decided that here's where the mathematics training comes in, right?
Hmm.
Mathematicians and scientists always create a hypothesis. I think this might be true. And then the training is you go about seeing if you can disprove it. And as long as you cannot disprove it or anybody can disprove it, then it holds true until somebody says it's not true.
Right.
And that's sort of a fundamental scientific
Hmm.
mathematical principle that we live by. So here I am in a sort of a crisis situation, not knowing what to believe or how to navigate life, and with the belief that what I was told may not be 100% wrong, but it's certainly not 100% right. And so I was going through, some people call it a dark night of the soul. So
Mm.
knowing I couldn't live there, I did what any good scientist would do. I created a hypothesis. And the hypothesis went something like that. I'm going to start with the belief that there's one God.
Mm.
I don't know what that means,
Right,
really,
right, right.
but everybody seems to say that, or at least a lot of religions say
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, it seems to me that if there's one God, there should be one message. Again, not necessarily true,
Hmm.
just a hypothesis. It could be possible that there's one God and he likes to screw with us and give us different messages. Or there could be multiple gods and this idea of one God is wrong. So I was open to all of that. But I started with the belief that there's one God, therefore there's one message.
Hmm.
Any good any good speaker knows that you speak to the audience. So if God wants people in Africa to understand his message or her message, depending on what you want to think about it,
Hmm.
the message, he or she will speak in language and in examples and parables related to people in Africa. And if I'm speaking to people in India,
Hmm.
I'll have different. So I could understand there will be different messages in form,
Hmm.
but the underlying message should be the same. So that was my hypothesis that I started my 20s with.
Oh, wow.
And again, just curiosity,
Hmm.
looking, seeking. The Bible says this, the Old Testament says this, Jesus says that, but Buddhism says this.
Mhm.
If I interpret it this way, they're really saying the same thing, just in different clothing. And so on and on I went throughout my life, trying to, again, take the clock apart, as I said, right?
I
And
love
trying
that. I
to,
love that metaphor is taking the clock apart.
so that's what I've spent my whole life doing, and I'm still doing that in many ways. I've got a lot.
I think that's part of life, Norman. I think in recognizing that that's what we're trying to kind of figure out. That's
I
why
think so.
I'm intrigued, like, by the living organization, like, because I think it's very interesting title, and I'm intrigued in how it connects with your quantum leaders organization, because I like one of the things that I know is like we're in this, like, we go back to HP and I said calculator, and we're in a world that like literally daily is just shifting at, we haven't even talked about AI yet. And it's
Yeah.
like all of these are part of it, and it's like it's when you say living organization, like there's something that's going on, and I'm real intrigued on your take on that. That's kind of why, like I said, it's kind of a neat way of going, and like even how you came up with the title for your book.
Um, so going back to what I said, I was at this conference. The
Yes.
woman said, right, and I ended at the end of the conference declared I'm going to write this book.
No way.
There was, again, you asked me how I navigate these challenges of life and how I make my choices. I don't know if there's something that was ingrained in me, or through my parents' examples and my brothers and sisters and other cousins, um, or whether it's just kind of who I came into the world as being.
Right.
Um, but I've always managed to make choices in my life when I am faced with various options. And something is showing up, like this woman comes up and says, "You should write a book." There was something in me that could not resist it.
Oh,
There's, some people call it follow your bliss, follow
yes.
your inner voice, follow your inner guidance. I guess something in me has always allowed me to follow, like even taking that job at HP to become the admin manager.
Mm.
I was very successful doing what I was doing. I knew this was going to be a really big challenge.
Yep.
In fact, every person that was a admin manager through the uh, 10 years or so before I took the job, something like that, all of them ended up leaving HP.
Oh, wow.
So this was not necessarily a pinnacle position.
Oh, there's some challenges there.
I remember talking to my wife at the time, and she said to me, Norman, you're bored of what you're doing. Done. You've already reached the pinnacle of your current job,
Right.
and you're the type of person that needs a challenge.
Yes.
And she verbalized what I was beginning to feel, that inner voice. I need. It's time for me to go into the next phase of my life. And
Interesting.
so that was always. I mean, so when this woman said you should write a book, here I am in this conference, and I'm with other people, and it's ruminating, right? And the inner voice is saying, "You're going to write this book."
And you can't
So at the
ignore
end of
it.
the conference, as we went around the circle, and what are you taking away from it? I made a declaration. I'm going to write a book, and it's called The Soul of the Corporation, because that's
Ah.
what came to me at the time.
Yes, yes, yes.
Over the course of 6 years of writing it, it began to reveal to me that there was something more than that, and that I was really postulating that
Oh.
the organization was something other than the machine paradigm. It was a living entity. It was a living organization.
I love how you say this, because it's a pretty big point. It's not a machine paradigm. It's not a machine. And it's interesting that you came up with this, because An organization is people. They're not machines. And yet we had that kind of example or metaphor for probably since the Industrial Revolution.
That's
The,
when it began, and it really took hold in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It sort of took hold with two people, Frederick Taylor and his approach to what later we call process optimization, right?
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
it was all about efficiency. And the second person, which isn't really as well known, is a gentleman called Henri Fayot, who is a French person who actually gave us the organizational structure of hierarchy and specialization.
Interesting.
You put those two together and you basically see the foundation of our current, what I and a lot of other people are calling the machine paradigm.
Yep.
It's a very simple model.
Mm-hmm.
It looks at the machine, it looks at an organization with a very specific focus in mind. How do we take inputs and convert them to outputs
Mm-hmm.
that have value for somebody? And what's inside this box that converts the inputs to outputs? So it's looking at it as a machine. And the best way to manage that is to design a very efficient machine, which means optimizing the component parts that you select and you put in the machine. But if you look at that language, what it's saying is people are just component parts. So, when we develop computers and computers come along, hey, let's replace people with computers. Let's make the systems do the work for us. And of course, then robots, and
mm-hmm.
then now artificial intelligence. And you can see the language, right? Oh boy, we can take these really complex, difficult, messy people and replace them with a nice, logical new component that's easier to manage and to get the results done. That's the thinking of the old paradigm, and that's what causes the problems.
Yeah, because when you think of a human being in any essence of as a machine, we spoke earlier about this, and it's about the living entity. There's an infinity part that we don't know how to deal with, and a machine doesn't have that part to it. And so I often think, like, and I'm going to give you this example, Norman, is going for a walk, and depending on where you are, people say hi to you and people don't say hi to you or whatever. And yet, if we walk past a beautiful piece of architecture or we see a Cybertruck, fancy car, or whatever, we just awe and ogle at it. And my point here is that, and this is where, to me, why I'm excited about your living organization, is because you just passed a person that is so beyond the complexity and marvel and miracle of a Cybertruck or a beautiful architecture. And you walked right by that person and completely ignored them, yet your eyes went to that fancy car.
Yeah, that's a
And
unfortunate byproduct of how our society has evolved. It wasn't always like that.
No, I agree. And that's why I said when the title of your book just conjures those things up into me, like it's an amazing thing of how you pull that apart. But your experience, I mean, you've seen it all.
The reason I focus on the living organization, and I have to clarify something, because there's a lot of people out there that recognize the mechanistic approach is very limiting. So what they're trying to promote is, they call it living systems thinking, right? If we treat an organization like nature, right, there's a naturalness to it. And nature, living systems are adaptable, they're resilient,
Mm-hmm.
they respond to their environments as it changes, so they can adjust to changing environments. Which all of those attributes are really aspirational, if you will. We want that.
Yes.
We want that in our organizations. So the natural tendency is to go to living systems. Here's the problem with living systems. Let's take a look at the question of, excuse me. When we talk about creating outcomes, what we're really talking about is, how do people, individuals or collectives, make a decision to on how they're going to respond to something that happens in life. So if you look at it from a mechanistic point of view, that's really easy. It's
Hmm.
based on the design of the machine.
Right.
So if you got a changing environment and the machine has to make decisions to respond to events or triggers, you redesign the machine so it gives the right output.
Hmm.
Very simple. Right? You can look at that as that's easy logically, very difficult to keep redesigning the machine over and over again when things are always changing. So that's one of the negative. That's why
Hmm.
machines thinking doesn't respond to today's world, because machines are not resilient. They're not adaptive. They're machines.
Great
Right?
point.
They have to be constantly redesigned. And so you have, things aren't working out. Let's redesign the machine. We'll have another offsite, another strategy session. We'll reorganize we'll move people around, and then we'll have a new design, and boom, then we'll be able. But before you get all that implemented, you got another change in today's world, and so
Oh yeah.
off you go again. So nothing ever gets changed, right?
Yep.
That's the way machines respond to
Hmm.
life. Let's look at living systems. Living systems also respond to life. The forest has a fire, and the trees move around, and they adjust, and they protect each other. And we're learning a lot about how living systems actually operate. But their way of responding is really encoded in their genetic DNA.
Oh yes.
An
Yes.
acorn is always going to respond to life in a way that an oak is supposed to respond to life. And it won't ever become a fish. It won't ever become a bird, right? And fish
Interesting.
won't fly
Interesting.
and birds won't swim. I mean, that's just the way it is. And they will adapt within the confines of their genetic DNA, or they would become extinct. And
Right. Right.
that's nature, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
organizations, well, people don't respond quite the same way. Now, people clearly are part of the living systems genre, but we have a unique attribute that is both limiting and unbelievably powerful. We create realities through our stories,
Mm.
and that allows us to transcend our limitations. Right? Because our limitations is nothing more than the frame of reference we live in, the stories we live
Absolutely.
in. And so humans, people could decide, I want to learn how to fly. Now, we won't change our genetic conditions, but we'll figure out the forces of flight and create not only fly in the
Hmm.
atmosphere, but go into space.
Hmm.
We'll dive under the earth. We'll change the dynamics of our environment. Right now, we're living in climate change, but we'll change that someday. We'll figure that out, hopefully,
It
before it
always
kills
does.
us. Uh, Humans are unique like that. That's our creative talent.
I have to pause here for a second because I think when you describe flight as an example, we have that ability, as you described, to figure out how to fly, right? But I always find it interesting when I look at a bird that flies like literally effortlessly from the railing on our porch to a wire overhead and then lands. Like, and both are done very gracefully. And then I think of what it takes for us to put something into the air. And it's just it's such a shift, right? Yes, we figured out how to fly and how to go into space, but compared to how a bird flies, we have a long way to go yet.
But birds learn that, and it's embedded in their genetic
Absolutely.
DNA, and the body is designed to facilitate that. But a bird never learns how to go underwater.
No.
It has no capacity to learn how. It could be, gee, I wonder how we get how those fish underwater swim so much, and they
Interesting.
can't do that.
No.
Well, it might evolve. Some element of that species might be curious enough and experiment and try it and die, and then the next one, and passes on. And so evolution could make birds that can both swim, and in fact we have animals like frogs that live
Hmm.
underwater on the right way. So evolution will facilitate things, but humans have this phenomenal ability to manifest their narratives, create a frame of reference,
Absolutely.
create a sense of what's possible. That same ability
Mm.
to create a frame of reference also keeps us locked into that frame of reference,
Yes,
right?
we get
And
comfortable with it.
we get comfortable with it. We don't want it to change. We want to maintain it. So humans have this phenomenal ability to be infinitely creative
Oh,
and infinitely stuck.
I like how you frame that.
And it's dealing with that reality that is critical to understanding how to make organizations effective. If we think of them as machines, we know the limitations of that.
Hmm.
Ideally, we'd like them to operate like living
Hmm.
systems, but that's a long, long process to get an organization be to
Hmm.
encode that in the DNA if we did it through evolution
Yep.
and life. One of the things I have come to recognize and appreciate and now explicitly articulate, business is a phenomenal game, and it is a game. It's got its own rules. We know how to do it.
Hmm.
It's different than university game, and it's different than religious
Hmm.
organizations. And the game of business is a time-based game. There are quarterly moments that you have to report your results.
Hmm.
There are annual moments. There are, and it's not just arbitrary. It's driven by the demands of the marketplace. If you don't, they will.
Hmm. Yes.
You better, So it's a very interesting game to think about how do we affect a collective of people to shift and change,
Mm.
to be innovative, to meet the constantly changing, rapidly changing needs of the environment we're in. And
So,
that's what the living organization tries to address.
so when you say that, you've conjured a few things into my mind because you mentioned working for a startup. And why I think this is fascinating because you've also worked with an established corporation. And why I bring these two things up is that a startup, I'll say by and large, you're trying to find something to make or do that's is valuable enough to someone else that they're willing to pay you for. And at some point, it doesn't even matter what it is. You just got to find that that is, right? As an entrepreneur, that's a big part of the job. Now you take an established corporation that has found that thing, and now, um, by and large, and for many years, they go adjusting that because it's what makes, call it the cash cow. We do cost reductions on it. We try to find faster ways to make it, and that's what keeps that organization going. But as we've already talked about, there is a time on how long that organization can continue to adjust that before we don't want a calculator anymore.
That's right.
But you still need the startup, and that's what ends up happening is the startup comes up with something new that someone values more and they're willing to buy it. And finding those two things in one corporation in itself is staggeringly difficult to do.
Yeah, it really is.
But when you
Uh,
talk about the living organization, that's what kind of frames in my head as far as the two things kind of coming together. Because it's almost like you're trying to you capture that because it is living.
so let me walk you through how through the lens, the reframing of the frame of references.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm gonna keep coming back to that thing behind you because it's so. If people learn how to live with that, life would be phenomenally different for them.
Oh
But
yes,
let me walk you through the living organization lens
beautiful.
of that journey that you just described. And I'm going to highlight a book I read many years ago. It's called Corporate Life Cycles. by a gentleman named Itzhak Hadises. He still has his own consulting firm. This goes back to probably the mid 80s when I first came across him, still early in my consulting career. And he probably influenced me unconsciously in terms of my model along these perspectives. When I think of a organization as a person, the natural tendency for me is to think about how does a person grow and develop to become effective. So the startup world, and this is what Itzhak did in his book Corporate Life Cycles. He talked about how organizations go from startup to initial growth to mature growth to evolution. And he uses the sigmoid curve, the S curve that people are familiar with. And what he talked about is there are very distinct challenges in each of those phases that are appropriate. But when you get to the next phase, you got to shift your ability to deal with the challenges of the previous phase to now shift and start with the challenges of the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
When I began to think of an organization as a person, this is my basic framework, is a collective of people who come together for a common purpose, actually gives birth to a living entity, transcendent and inclusive of everybody inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the organization as a whole is itself a person with its own persona, its own narrative, its own belief systems, its own context, its own way of responding to life. So let's look at it. I'm a startup, right?
Mm-hmm.
The startup operates just like an infant does. I mean, think about it, right? There's a lot of experimentation. They don't really know what the hell they're doing. They try this, they fall, they get up, and eventually they learn to stabilize themselves and they learn to walk, and then they somehow magically come across something somebody wants, right? After a lot of experimentation. And it all starts, this is the interesting thing. This goes back to what I talked about. I don't know whether it's nature or nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Every startup I've found, every entrepreneur I've ever worked with started, and I should backtrack, not every entrepreneur, most of the entrepreneurs, and all the ones I've worked with, started not with the idea of making gazillion dollars. They weren't starting the company to make money.
Mm-hmm.
They started the company because they saw something in their experience that nobody was addressing, and they thought they had a way of addressing it. And so it starts with sort of a core purpose, an underlying, what I now call the soulful purpose of the organization, the very core essence of why it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And they experiment around that, right? And to a lot of people on the outside looking in, and I remember having this conversation with a CEO once, he said, everybody thinks I keep changing my mind. I'm not. I'm still doing the one thing I've always set out to do. So from the outside in, it looks like this person doesn't know what the hell they're doing. They're all over the place. But to them, inside of them, they're not all over the place. They're just trying to find that, what people call that initial minimal viable product, that MVP that has value to somebody. Now, that's phase one. Totally chaotic, constantly changing, getting up and falling down until they learn to walk. Phase one. Right? That's the startup phase. And then lo and behold, they find something. They find customers. They start generating revenue. Now the goal is, let's do that over and over again. And they optimize their behaviors to fulfill the need of their marketplace, right? And so that's sort of like the teenage years, right? They've got a foundation on what to build, but now they're learning how to be in the world, right? How to be effective in the world and how to grow in the world, right?
I like that.
And so that's like the teenage years. And there's a lot, and if you know teenagers, there's a huge growth spurt. And they're learning to stabilize, right?
When you say that, it's when I think of teenagers, and I think even of going back to that, it almost seems like the number one objective of a teenager is just trying their best to fit in.
Yes.
Like,
Yes, that's a good way to describe it.
and that's
Exactly.
exactly what you just said. Like you're trying to
That's
figure
happening
that
out
out.
of That's right. And so you begin to learn the rules of the game. You begin
Yeah.
to learn how to play the game, right? And so that becomes part of what we call the psychic DNA. This is now starts to determine how do we as a collective operate in life? What are the rules of the game we're fitting into, and
Hmm.
how do we play that game? And then we get to the um, 20s and 30s, right? So now we're into the productive phase of our life. We got it figured out. Now we're in that high growth spurt,
Hmm.
right? Uh, and we're going along great, and we've got it all figured out until such point in time. And for humans, this is your midlife crisis, where everything you've done up to now isn't working anymore.
Yes.
In Itzhak Adizes' book on that sigmoid curve, you now
Yep.
reach the pinnacle of the curve.
It's great.
And if you stay there, the other side of that curve is literally death.
Yes.
Right? This is the buggy whip manufacturer that's in the automotive industry.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
You're an expert in what you're doing. You've been so successful. And because we humans like to be successful, why should I change doing what I've always done that made me successful on the thought that we're going to
Yes.
do right? So we've got stability,
Hmm.
but now we're looking at the opposite of the coin, change.
Hmm.
So you can see the pattern that
Oh, yeah.
happens with organizations is the exact same pattern that happens to human beings.
Absolutely.
And this is the essence of the living organization philosophy or framework is if we began to see organizations as people going through the exact same journey people go through throughout our lives, then we can address the real issues and not try to simply simplify it by redesigning the machine to be better at what it does.
Right. Right. Right.
It won't work,
No,
right? Because
it won't.
you can't redesign a human like it was a machine. It just doesn't work. So that's the underlying belief of the living organization is think of it as a person and begin to recognize that the very skills I need as a parent to help my child go through these phases are the same skills I need as a leader to help my organization go through these phases. And when it's and here's the interesting thing, when I reach the top of that S curve, when I reach that
Yes.
level of maturity, when I'm at my midlife and I've done everything, and now what?
Yep.
I'm actually starting the curve all over again.
Hmm.
So here I am, mature, an expert, efficient, confident, knowing what I'm doing, going back into a startup phase where it's uncertainty, chaos, uh, experimentation, figuring it out as I go.
Yep.
Everything looks like it's changing, but we have a common thread that drives us to it. So there's a tension, and this is why change is so difficult, is there's a tension between the desire to stay an expert
Yep.
and going back and being a kid all over again, learning how to walk. And we don't want to do that. As humans, we don't want to do it. But if you look at all of the traditions, especially in the Buddhist sense, the Buddhists talk about the parable of the empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
If the cup is already filled with all your expertise, you'll never be able to put anything new in it, so you can't grow and develop. So the notion of the beginner's mind and the empty cup reminds us that as humans, to really grow and keep evolving and expanding, we got to start all over, like be children. Even Christ said,
yes,
to enter the kingdom of heaven, you've got to be like a child, right? You got to go into that place of not knowing and be comfortable with not knowing that you will, through the being uncomfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable, you'll become comfortable again. It's the paradox of life.
Absolutely. Well, when you say it, like this is where I was saying the actual attributes of someone who's really good in the startup mode. And it's exactly as you describe it as a kid, right? Like you're okay with failure because everything's not going to work. You're willing to try anything and change it and do all these things. Whereas the established organization, as you say, who's hit the pinnacle of the product, it's the exact opposite. Like, no change. Like, we've been doing this all along. It works really good. It's never
Let's
gonna.
keep doing it. Let's just do it more. Let's do it harder. Let's do it faster.
And
Let's keep doing it.
you know what's really interesting historically, and this is what's coming up in the conversation here, is you did something with HP. I mentioned calculators. Don't even know what a calculator is today, kind of thing. And we're stretching now into the AI world. And this literally, that's less than 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just how fast that
Yeah.
part is coming. Like, you can't, now it's almost, it's truly like a living organism now. Because, like, when you think about walking out the door as a person, right? Your weather changes what you have to do, right? You have things that you have to adjust to all the time. And
Yes.
that's what you're, I think, describing as the living corporation. It's just that takes time to evolve to be able to allow and address those things, because products are changing so quickly.
And the key to that for organizations, and again through the lens of the living organization framework, is recognizing that our capacity to execute as a machine is a function of our design and our skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Resources, design of the machine, having the right components in place, and so forth. That's what determines how effective a machine can execute. Mm-hmm. But when you're dealing with people and you ask, how does a person become effective in executing,
Yes.
especially in a changing world, there's two components. The capacity to execute is a function of the capability, so the skills we have. I mean, if I want to be good at computers, I got to learn how to program computers using today's languages, not Fortran or COBOL. But also our maturity.
Yes.
And if you think about what maturity is, we break it down into three parts. One is our ability to think at the highest level possible, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not just thinking about me and mine and my little domain, but I'm thinking about how I fit into what's above me and what's above that, right? Mm-hmm. When we work with clients, and this is something I learned from HP, you don't think about what the client needs. Think about what the clients need. Because you can help the client satisfy their client's need.
Yes.
You're going to be much more valuable to them. Right? If you just so how big of a systems thinker can somebody be, right? And how comfortable are they with change as we mature?
Oh yeah.
You know, when I was 12 years old, I liked my world the way it was.
Oh yeah.
By the time I'm 50 and 60, I recognize, change happens all the time. You know, when I went through HP, as I said, I was there at the beginning of the heyday, and when we went through the heyday, we were growing 50% a year. That's a phenomenal amount of change. Phenomenal. I remember taking over the administrative organization, and one of the things I said in my first all hands management meeting was, we live in a world where we're producing a new computer every 3 years. Technology is changing at the rate of every 3 years something new is hitting the streets.
Yeah.
If you think about that, that means every year, 1/3 of everything you know is obsolete. And in 3 years, you're obsolete completely.
That's staggering.
So we began to inbred or breed into our thinking process in my leadership team the need to accept change. Don't fight it, accept it, or step into a world where change is smaller, which is hard to find these days.
No question about it.
So the ability to change, to be comfortable with change, to be comfortable with uncertainty happens the more mature you are. The ability to deal with people in relationship with different points of view, what people call emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Is again, increases as you mature, right?
We want to hope so.
One would hope so. That's right. Some people that are kind of stuck in their ways, I acknowledge that. And the third element is the ability to learn from your mistakes, to get a performance review that's and take it as an opportunity to grow and develop. Right? to make a mistake and to say, here's what I've learned from it, and then go on and do it better the next time. To self-reflect, to be able to take feedback and to give feedback and to process it. And um, so those are the elements of maturity. If systems thinking, relationship dynamics, and self-improvement and self-accountability and ownership. The more we help our people mature individually and collectively, the more an organization can go from,
Mm-hmm.
I've developed this, and guys, guess what? That's old. Here's new. We're starting all over again like we're a startup. And people go, oh, cool. That's exciting. Time to embrace that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we had organizations that can do that, they will constantly remake themselves to fit in the changing environment. So capability and maturity are the two key areas that leaders have to pay attention to. And the most valuable of that is the maturity one. Skills are easy to learn, and they come and go. I remember at HP,
Mm.
the head of the HP labs at the time was giving a talk at one of our worldwide region managers meeting. And I remember him saying, when I go out and hire people, I'm not looking for the best engineers. Because whatever they learn at university or the
Yeah.
doctorate program, their expertise, it's going to be obsolete in a few years.
Amazing.
I want the best thinkers. I'd rather have a philosophy major who can think about the future in ways that nobody else is thinking than have the best electrical engineer out of MIT. And that stuck with me also. Another one of those environmental
Yep.
factors that made me who I am.
That's so powerful.
Those are the things that we work with leaders to learn how to integrate into their leadership style. And that's what the second book is about. Leading the Living Organization is about the 6 skills we've identified leaders need to have
Oh yeah.
to be able to lead a living organization.
It's funny because there's so many examples that come to my mind as you describe those three and putting that together. Because I remember reading on, I think it was Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was like connection with HP too in his history.
Yes, he did.
But one of the questions he said, by and large, he found customers didn't know what they even wanted. And you kind of said that about going to the client, which I think is kind of fascinating because until it's demonstrated to you that you can see a value in it, it's hard for you to kind of figure that out, I think, by and large, as a person, right? Because we're not thinking that way. We're usually thinking, okay, the refrigerator cools my food well. I don't need to change that. The other thing about speed you were talking about, and I think this kind of came with the whole world of Tesla, with the cars, and because what they did, having been involved a little bit with the car business, I thought the barriers to entry to the car business were beyond breakable. Like to start a new car company in today's world, to me, seemed like the barrier to entry is beyond. But you already said this. You have to change your frame of reference. And that's kind of what happened. But 2 things unfolded. One of them is software development became so big in the automotive world is you can update software overnight in minutes. But your new car model takes 3 years to get out there. And you kind of nailed it when you were saying like all of these things now, that has just upped it by like how many factors in today's world and how much quicker. And when you say, I'm not looking for an MIT electrical engineer, I want a philosopher that can think our way through these in order to be able to execute. It's a very different way of looking, Norman. Very different way of looking at it.
You mentioned the car business. It brought to mind this notion of paradigms was ingrained in me when I was at HP, and we did one of the management training programs we had. Included a video by Joel Barker, and it was called Paradigms or something like that. And it's where I got introduced to paradigms. But one of the examples he used, he said, people are looking, this is '70s, late '70s, early '80s, something like that. And so you know what was happening in the auto industry at that time. The Japanese were coming in,
Yes.
and the big three were.
Yep.
And on the video, he said, people are looking for the golden ring of automotive. They want a high, miles per gallon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these these students at this university developed a car. I think I'm going to make up the number, but it's pretty close to it. A car that travels at 200 miles per gallon.
Right.
He said, except nobody in the automotive industry thinks of this as an automotive design because they use hydraulics instead of a gas engine. The hydraulics gave you a lot of leverage, and they were able to design a car that got 200 miles per gallon. So you're right. Tesla came along and said, I don't have to follow their model. I don't have to have a gas-powered engine. I don't have to have redesigns to improve performance. I just have to adjust the computer programming that runs it, and it's all electrical. And he proved it could be done, and Tesla's really brilliant at getting people to back him, and he had the resources necessary, and he made it happen. That's what an entrepreneur does. But he broke the model. He changed his frame of reference. He saw a car not through the lens that the big three think about it, but through the lens of, and the big three ran into a problem with Japan.
Yes.
I was at HP during that time, and YHP, which is our Japanese affiliate, won the Deming Award.
Yes.
And so everybody from corporate went over to Japan to figure out what they did differently. And we began to bring back, the principles of, Japanese manufacturing techniques, which was later encapsulated in, the Toyota manufacturing process and lean manufacturing and all of that stuff. But in the early days, the Japanese companies, because they had a completely different frame of reference about what a production line was all about, created much better quality machines or automobiles than our big three could ever do. And so they blew the big three out of the water. Again, they changed their frame of reference and saw the problem through a different lens and ended up with solutions the best of the best in the old paradigm can never find. And that's why I love the sign. Change your frame of reference, and the world opens up to you.
Well, to me, it became part of what I started, and this goes back in history, but I'm in the Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler world. And I mean, we've got all our technology today, so we can see a lot of this. But to kind of have your foot planted on the Earth and figure out that the sun doesn't orbit the Earth is almost impossible to me.
That's right.
Like, because it like every day you're reminded of the fact that, well, it goes from the east, it goes down the west, and it does that every single day. How can it not orbit the Earth?
That's right.
And unless you shift that frame of reference, you're never going to come up with a different picture, because it's
nope.
And to me, it's like you see it all that you kind of see it all the time. So in your world today, Norman,
yes,
you're we introduced you as the CEO of Quantum Leaders.
Yes,
and you mentioned quantum physics already, and I can't. And with your book, The Living Organism, and leading the living organism or organization, pardon me. How does this fit when you're talking to leaders today? Because like many must be, what am I doing with AI? It's going to change everything. And bringing this whole idea of, well, the organization you're leading is living. It actually is not a machine. How does that work in your world today?
That's a great question, and the reason that I'm kind of nodding my head, going, "Yep, that's a big one," is because I've learned a lot over the last decade and a half since the first book, which is The Living Organization, was published. And it's through the struggle. I mean, most of my life, most of my journey, we go back to the take the clock apart metaphor. Uh, I kept working with clients and watching them struggle. They loved the idea, but implementing it was not easy.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, in today's world, here's what I've come up with. First of all, that watching the leaders struggle through implementing the philosophy of thinking of an organization as a person
Mm-hmm.
led me to recognize the 6 skills that I identified in leading the living organization. That they need to embrace and learn and develop those skills. And we can explore that some more. But all of this, if you remember, all of this started with the desire to help organizations uh, create these or execute the strategy more effectively. In other words, we're doing XYZ today, but tomorrow we want to do ABC because that's where we see, as the hockey metaphor say, that's where we see the puck going in the
Yes.
future. We want to skate to where it's going, not to where it is, right? The
Love it.
typical purpose of strategy, if you want to call it that. And so how does an organization, a leader of an organization, execute strategy? That's always what this has been about.
Mm.
And what I realized was, well, first you have to shift your paradigm. So that was book 1, right? Here's the new way, the change of your frame of reference. This is what you need to do. The second book is, well, if you're going to change your frame of reference and you're going to lead an organization this way, you need some new skills. Mm-hmm. So that was what book 2 is all about. Mm. But we're in the process now of outlining and writing book 3, which is creating results the living organization way. And that's really what Quantum Leaders is focused on, is actually working with leaders to create it. And the way we go about it is based on something very simple. When you think of people and you ask them how they develop, it always requires the acceptance of a challenge they want to achieve. Now, key words here, they want to achieve, not something they're told they have to achieve. Because if you tell something you have to do this,
that's different.
Even if the person themselves use the word I have to, there's an internal resistance to that. Mm-hmm. Right? We do a little exercise with people to bring this point home. It's a simple exercise. List all the things you feel you have to do over the next day or 2 or week, right? And just list them. And it's, I have to pay the bills. I have to do the laundry. I have to wash, the dishes. I have to go out and get groceries. I have to meet this deadline. I have to, right? Just list all those things. And then we pair them up and we have each one read the list, but saying, I have to X, I have to Y, I have to. Right? And then at the end of that little exercise where they both share, we just simply ask them, what did that feel like? Oh my God, it's burdensome. It's overwhelming. Got so much I have to do and blah, 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 blah. Uh-huh. And the energy is drained. It's like overweight. And they want to fight against it. Mm-hmm. And the second part of the exercise is cross out the word have to and replace it with either choose to, want to, or get to. So now I'm going, I want to pay the bills. I want to go to the grocery store. I want to meet that deadline. You can almost hear it in my voice without even, there's a different quality of engagement when somebody chooses to want to do something. So here's the way our work evolves. We start with, first of all, understanding what's the new thing you want to do, right? Then we understand what are the patterns of behavior that have been optimized to do what you're doing today. Okay? Now, we still use all the same strategy systems like building the goals and the objectives and the KPIs, but we're actually working underneath that. Like we're looking at, okay, so we want to have this goal achieved. We want to achieve this KPI. We want to do these new customer relationship things. We want to implement this new technology, whatever it is.
Right.
And then we look at, okay, but what are you doing today? and how established is that pattern? And most importantly, here's the thing that people don't really understand is those narratives we believe that we have accepted to follow is tied to our sense of identity because it's tied to how we feel we're going to be successful, right? So when you're asking somebody to change this narrative or their behaviors, you're actually challenging their sense of identity. Hey, I know how to build disk drives. I can build the best disk drive in the world. I'm an expert. I've studied, I got my PhD in disk technology. And now you want me to use CD-ROM?
Yes.
That's not a disk. You see the sense of identity is involved. So what we want to do when we work with a client is clearly articulate what is that underlying narrative that's causing people to want to stay doing what they're doing. Now, if we can find a way to change that narrative in a way that doesn't replace their sense of identity, but expands their sense of identity, you've now moved them into a more, gee, I want that.
Yeah.
As opposed to, that threatens me. Now it's, I want that. So we work to change the narrative. I'll give you an example. We were working with an engineering firm where they were a sole source supplier to the United States government. They did high-end cryptography. Right? So they developed the algorithms and even the hardware to meet really, really stringent, for the three-letter companies that if you mention, they'll kill you kind of thing, right? The really intelligence community, high-end intelligence community. Sole source supplier. So the engineers' identity was tied up in creating the most elegant solutions
for sure
that nobody else could create.
Yep.
And since they were sole source supplier, they didn't have to worry about competitive bidding. Great. Now they're in a different environment, and they're in the competitive bidding environment, and the government isn't interested in sole source. They, for economic reasons, they want to go to standard off-the-shelf technology as much as possible.
Sure.
So now this company is going out and getting opportunities, and they're getting bids, and they're proposing, but they're losing all their bids. They only were winning about 10% of all their bids. So they bring in a major consulting company, spend, I think, about $130,000 redesigning their process because this company has worked with other government bidding companies who bid, big aerospace firms and what have you. And they have this wonderful process, and they bring in this new process, and the bid success rate goes from 10% to 12%. I mean, not really moving the needle.
Right.
Now, I'm working with the CEO on strategy and other things. I'm not involved with this piece particularly, but we're talking one day, and he said, Norman, can you go figure out what's going on? Can you help me understand why I just spent all this money and nothing's changing? So I sat with the engineers, and I discovered their sense of identity, if you will, what made them do what they do. And what was happening is they were still living in the old world. The business development people kept coming back with bids, and they kept saying, that's too expensive. They won't buy us. And the engineer says, well, that's your job. Go get us the money. You've always gotten us the money. Go get us the money.
Yep.
The narrative was, we are the best at creating the most elegant solutions. You know how we changed the narrative? Now, it wasn't in one meeting, obviously. Right. It took time and conversation. But the change in the narrative was, you're right, you are phenomenal at creating elegant solutions. But any engineer with infinite resources can eventually come up with an elegant solution.
Yes.
Only the really, really best engineers can come up with elegant solutions within a constrained budget. Now, are you really the best engineers? Now you can see I'm not taking anything away from them. No. We still want to be the best engineers. We still want to come up with the most elegant solutions, but we want to be able to do it within the constraints.
Yep.
Can you do that? And so I now challenge them to be even better I added on. I didn't replace. I added on and expanded the sense of identity.
I was going to say you're saving their identities. That's for sure.
And unless you know how to do that, change is really almost impossible.
So this, uh, Norman, this is kind of brilliant. Um, Pardon the word, but I don't know because it's really like we started here, like no one wants to change. Like that's just in us, right? But I think you've nailed something here around the fact that why we don't want to change. It's not necessarily occurs to anyone, and that is when you're making me change, I've linked my identity, whether I know it or not, to what I'm doing. And now you come in and ask me to change my, even though it's a physical activity that I'm doing, whatever it is, I've linked that to who I am. And you're asking me now to change who I am.
That's right.
And that is primal. Like
That's
that's
right.
very deep. And
Absolutely.
I've not heard I don't remember ever hearing this before. Like I think this
Yeah.
is a very, very key thing. Because I'm saying even when you know that, it's not necessarily easy.
Well, here's the thing, and again, I'm not the first one to really talk about this. I just put it into, a, take the clock apart and look at all the
Well,
pieces and put it all
you've put
together.
it in words, Norman, to me
That's right.
that's clear and a little like it's not it's not an academic understanding here. This is every day. Like of course my identity's in my job title. That's why I hate it when you change my job title.
Right? That's right. Yeah, yeah. And what I wanted to point to was, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gave us the notion of the stages of grief we have to go through,
Oh
right?
my goodness.
And it's an energetic process. The guy who wrote "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Phoenix,"
Yes.
Gray, whatever his first name was. Um, he once said somewhere in one of his books, the mind can process the change intellectually very rapidly.
Hmm.
And he was talking about divorce,
Hmm. Hmm.
but the body cannot.
Hmm.
The body has to energetically release the old patterns to allow the new patterns to take hold. And that's sort of at the core of how we work with businesses,
Hmm.
is recognizing we have to facilitate the shift in the energy patterns. And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to take months to do that if you know how to address it. And I'll give you another example. I was working with a client, and it's kind of an interesting story. So the owner founder passed away at the age of 93. The owner found at his desk.
Wow.
The owner founder had created this company. It was about a $50 million company. And he was, you might call, a benevolent, capricious dictator.
Hmm.
Loved his people, and his people knew they loved him.
Hmm.
He liked to control everything. So
Hmm.
his people were primarily tactical in nature
Right.
and relied on him to make most of the key decisions. Um, he was capricious in that he get pissed at you and say, "You're fired." And then when you're walking out the door with your box of stuff, he said, "Where are you going?"
Yes.
So
Yes.
it was
Absolutely.
just to give you a kind of a
Yep.
cultural. Right?
Great picture.
So he passes away, and the board has to replace him, and the
Mm.
board, finds this guy from one of the bigger beverage companies. This was in the sort of tangential, but in the beverage industry. Um, and they bring in this guy he came from Hanson. Now, Hanson, like HP, believed in empowering the people, management by objective, and
Hmm.
all of that. And he comes in and he sees that, wow, this owner founder really was a dictator and tyrannical and capricious, and I'm going to change all that. So he literally changed everything. He took the founder's picture off the wall. He eliminated Founders Day, and he started to empower his people, management by objective. Right now, these are people who don't know how to think about
Yeah.
objectives.
Right.
That
Right.
tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he's no, you figure it out. I'm empowering you. Right? He was failing. He hired me to help him, and I actually told him, "You're not a good fit, and I'm going to recommend to the board they should replace you. So you should quit."
Oh,
which he did. He recognized it, and it was a very amicable separation. It wasn't obviously in one meeting. We had a number of meetings to see if he could fit into the picture,
that's
into
really
the
hard,
job.
as
Yeah,
you
but
noted though. Like that is a
so the
crazy
new
thing.
guy comes in,
Yep.
and we're talking, and I said to him, one of the things that never happened in this organization, the organization was never allowed to grieve, and so it's stuck.
Oh.
It's stuck in its old way, and it can't let go. So when we had our strategic offsite, I did basically a memorial service, but it took a business form, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, let's take a look at what did you like about the old way?
Mm-hmm.
And we listed it, and there was some really beautiful things that they had in there. And it was sort of like I say a memorial service, because if you think about a memorial service, what do? You people get up and they talk about the person who
Mm-hmm.
has passed and what that life was like and how it was wonderful and all the beauty he brought into the world. That was part one. Part two was, okay, so this is the stuff we like and we want to kind of keep it as we move forward, or at least elements of it. But no environment's ever perfect. So let's talk about what we didn't like.
Right.
So we made a list of that. And that also happens at memorial
Yeah.
services. We make jokes about their oddities and their idiosyncrasies.
Idiosyncrasies.
And we bring that all to the surface, and that facilitates, in essence, the grieving process, right? We're dissipating the old pattern and allowing a new pattern to form. And that's what I did with the organization. So we created this list of, these are the things we liked about the old way. These are the things we didn't like about the old way.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we want to go in the future. What do we want to take from the old way that we liked and bring forward? And what did we not like about the old way, that if
Yeah.
we flipped it on its other side and said, if we do the opposite of that, we want to bring that forward. And we created basically the new identity for that organization, right? But I took them through the death and grieving process, because if you don't do that, the organization will be stuck. And you cannot do that, as Gray said, intellectually.
No. No.
So again, thinking of an organization as a person gives you new tools to understand how to take the organization through these various change processes. And that's really what I've done, is I've taken the tools we know, how to raise a child, how to help a child become mature, how to go through change processes like that. I remember I was at the HP and we were going through this period of 50% change a year, right?
Yeah.
Phenomenal growth.
Yes.
I mean, I promoted people into management positions who were only there 9 to 12
Right.
months. I mean, I just had to. We were adding so many people. I had to find. And we were at one of our management retreats, and we had Ken Blanchett come and
Yes.
speak to us.
Yes.
And I remember Ken's statement was, and he was drawing on Kubler-Ross's work. He said, "You guys are going through change, and all change is death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go in the room, get angry, stop blaming the world, get a little depressed, go through the cycle, and then come out and start creating the new world you want to create." Another one of those environmental things that has stuck with me throughout my life and has led me to embed that into the living organization framework.
No, that it is. Well, I was gonna say you certainly gave a connection between your books and quantum leaders. I was gonna say that just pulls it all together. Those are amazing stories. I also know that we have to watch our time here.
Yeah, we got probably another 15, 20 minutes, so we're good still if you want to
Well,
continue.
I was
This has
going to
been
say what I wanted to talk about a little bit is one of the things that you have two books out, you're working on a third. Um, People can get those books on, I believe, on Amazon.
yeah,
Do you have a website, Norman, that
yes.
yeah, let's get those things out. We'll put them in the blurb for the description of the episode, but
So there
where
are
if somebody wants to, they've just heard you explain this idea of change in the organization is grieving and death. They want to talk to you. what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Easiest way, NWOLFE, Nwolf, at quantumleaders.com. It's my email. I respond to everything. Tell me, you heard me on the Better Than Not podcast,
Yes.
and we will have a conversation. And that's probably the best way.
So you're okay with putting up your email for people to contact you with?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can also find me on LinkedIn. I think you've got my
Yes.
LinkedIn contact.
Yep.
You can post that as well. I am not as active on LinkedIn as I am on email. So if you really want to get to me,
Email's the way.
Email's the way. If you want to check me out and look at my profile and what I do and my posts and learn about that, you can go to LinkedIn. I've got two websites, quantumleaders.com.
Okay.
And the second one is thelivingorganization.com.
Okay.
And you can go there. We're actually in the process of updating them yet again. I can't tell you how many times.
Change.
Change. Websites are never stagnant. I don't know whoever created websites and said, that's it. It's not like a book. It's constantly evolving. But both websites will be present. You can find all of our books, The Living Organization, Leading the Living Organization, and Improv Your Relationships, which is a book my wife wrote. I should highlight that I've written the second book with Jane, my wife.
Oh, that's cool.
We're co-authors, and it was an absolutely delightful experience. Challenging at times, as one can imagine, but a really delightful experience. We wanted to write the second book as a business parable, as a story of a CEO who's struggling, and that's what the second book is. These ideas.
That's really cool. What's so interesting to me, Norman, with this, and I think this is rare quality, but you seem to have been able to capture your life experience and put it into how the modern world needs to shift as organizations go, and that to me is a rare quality. I find it very fascinating how you do that, because I have one last thing I want to go through with you before we leave.
Yeah,
and that is how do you help leaders today? Like, I mean, there's a headline every morning: AI is taking jobs. AI is going to revolutionize the world. AI is going to. How do you deal with leaders that are coming to you? They may be a low tech industry, doesn't matter what it is. And they're saying, like, what are we going to do with this AI? I hear that it's going to take over the world. I hear that it's going to be sentient. How do you deal? Because it just continues on, in a way, what you've already talked about, because you've been in the technology world forever, like since the beginning, right? What do you do? Like, what things do you talk to, like, a leader or a person who's like faced with this, and they're really concerned?
yeah, and rightfully so. The first thing I'll tell them is, do not think of your organization as a machine, because you will absolutely destroy yourself, because you will naturally be thinking about, how do I replace these components with this new wonderful component, and you will kill your organization. So don't do that, right? That's the first.
That's good.
The first.
That's good.
Let's put AI, and yes, it is really a phenomenal breakthrough. I mean, this is like quantum physics. We had years and years of discovery of physics, and then all of a sudden we took not an incremental leap, but a step function in understanding how the universe works. And the AI is not new. I mean, people don't realize they've been using AI for years.
Yes.
Unconsciously. Microsoft Word and its ability to correct your spelling and to catch your spelling. That's all artificial intelligence. Right? So I studied expert systems, which was early forms of artificial intelligence, back in 1975 when I was studying at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Connecticut.
It's not new.
It's not new. What is new is the amount it helps humans, I should say relieves humans of functions they've been doing for years, they can do much faster. And it's much easier if they learn it. Now, let's put that in perspective, what I just said.
Hmm.
Think of every tool or technology that has ever come along. Humans, by their nature, because we have so many physiological limitations and such big visions of what's possible, right? We create tools that enable this limited physical body to do things it's not meant to do. We will do that forever. We created fire to keep us warm. We created the wheel to help us move things around better. We created the airplane to give us freedom of the skies. We created space travel to take us into space. We created the computer to help us process things faster. We constantly are creating things for the sole purpose of making our lives better. We don't have to get up in the morning and spend our whole day plowing the fields just to feed our family and only spend maybe an hour or two at night by candlelight reading a book to give us a picture of something bigger. We can get on the internet and look at the universe through so many different lenses. It's actually confusing, but we can do that now,
Yeah.
right? We can have Zoom calls with people around the world, like we're having coffee in a cafe together.
Unbelievable.
Phenomenal ability to enhance our lives. So my guidance to CEOs is simple. Look at your living person and how can AI enhance that person's ability to remove tasks they've been doing because they have to get to the point of creating what they want to. And if you think about it from that perspective, you will find the right path to the implementation of AI for your organization.
Beautiful.
Because that's what the tools are always meant to do, whether it's robotics. Now, are there changes to what people have been doing all along in a sense of identity, as we just talked about? Absolutely. My sense of identity of being a great researcher just to get to
Exactly.
that's going to go away. That's not
Exactly.
going to happen. So how do I take what they did really well, add on to it, and enhance what they can do in the future so their sense of identity is expanded, not eliminated or replaced? If you take those two things into account, you'll find the right solution as a leader to the proper implementation of AI. And it'll only make your company and your people that much better.
You know, Norman, how you just sum that up. I usually kind of end with asking how you would, if there's anything you haven't said yet, what would you like to add? But I think how you just said that, I think is where we should end. I don't think you like that to me eases a lot of thought as
Oh,
far as
thank
how
you.
you kind of go about it. I think if many people heard that, it would really significantly change how they see it because it is, as you started saying it, it's made a big difference in how we look for things and find things and ask questions and get answers to them. But I'm
Yeah.
still going to ask you, if there is there anything you'd like to wrap up with, because we probably should land this thing today.
Well, first of all, Doug, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to have such an in-depth conversation. It's not just a quick 20-minute podcast so I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to share so deeply about the life I've lived and the principles I have.
Thank you.
I think I'll end it with what's on your on the thing behind you, right? Don't get stuck in the frame of reference you've been using all along. Give yourself the gift of opening up to see the world through a different lens and see what unfolds for you. See what emerges. See what challenges you've had that you've been stuck on, and how looking at it through a completely different lens will give you new opportunities to solve those challenges. So I can't emphasize enough. I mean, my whole world is about what I call shifting from one paradigm to another, which is just another way of saying a changing frame of reference will open up new possibilities always. So
Love
that's what I'll leave people
Love
with.
it. I love it. I was going to say that's a great way to wrap up. I've been talking with Norman Wolfe today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Better Than Not. You can reach out to Norman at his email, nwolfe@quantum.com.
Quantumleaders.com.
Quantumleaders.com. We'll put that up in the brief if you're looking for it. He has 2 books out. You want to look those up wherever you get your books. The living organization and leading the living organization. He also mentioned another book. He snuck another book in there that I think we need to get the title of as well. Norman, can you give that other book that I think your wife wrote?
My wife wrote. It's called Improv Your Relationships.
Improv Your Relationships.
It's also on Amazon, and all 3 books are on the livingorganization.com website. If you go to resources, there'll be a drop down the books, and it'll take you to the landing page for all 3 books, and you'll have the opportunity to order it through our website if you wanted to get all of them at once.
Perfect. So that I'm going to say ends our episode today. I thank you, Norman, for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation. And if you were listening and you're dealing with change in your life, just remember it is impacting your identity. And that is maybe where you need to be looking in order to address that change. And Norman brought that to us today. It works throughout our lives, throughout our organization. I thank you very much for tuning in to Better Than Not. I hope you'll subscribe, and I'll say goodbye, Norman.
Bye, Doug. Thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.